Overburdening an easement. So when you have an easement on a piece of property, there's a burden associated with that. So, you know, I can't use the part of my property where I have got a gas pipeline buried now to have a swimming pool. You know, that's a burden on my property. It's worth less than it was before. So the question then becomes, you know, if you've got an easement, how much can you do on that easement? And at what point do you cross the line between, you know, the burden that was contemplated at the time that the easement was granted and really some new use that requires additional compensation? So the general rule is that a dominant estate owner, the easement holder, has no right to increase the burden of the easement by engaging in a new use. Now, there are exceptions to that, and this is really one of those situations where the exception is the rule, and that is that, you know, as long as the use of the easement is still consistent with the spirit of the original easement, courts are going to come down on the side of saying that that's not an additional burden for which new compensation is due. And a good example of that is advances in technology. You know, if you've got a practice that used to involve, I don't know, like for example, you have a pipeline, a gas pipeline on a property, and they used to walk the corridor once a year and look for any issues with the pipeline, maintenance sort of stuff. And now instead they use a helicopter, and you know, they fly over 35 times a year because they've got all these requirements that are new. And they have to use that technology to cover the ground that they need to cover, and it's loud and, you know, much worse than just having somebody walk through. Well, that's a technological innovation that's not compensable. So speaking of the exception being the rule in this area, there's a long line of Ohio Supreme Court cases that talk about situations where the burden of an easement has been increased, and the courts, including primarily the Ohio Supreme Court, have come down on the side of saying this is permissible use under the original easement. So the first one here is the Friedman transfer and construction case against Youngstown. You had water pipes under a bridge. The reasoning that the court employed in that case, if you can believe it, is, well, somebody could have just put the water in trucks and drive it across the bridge, and nobody would say that that's an increased burden. So really just using a pipe to go under the road where nobody can see it is a technological innovation, and using it is not compensable, not a new burden. The Ziegler case is similar, an underground water pipeline, not an added burden under a road. Stringing a coax cable along an existing electric utility line, not an additional burden. You know, you've got a bunch of wires up there in the air. What's one more?